Excellent. Thank you, Haley. So we like to start off, we've learned from doing webinars all these years, we like to start off with the things to know in case you have to step away and you don't get to come back. And it's also a way for us to sort of lead you to the questions that we're going to answer, and also maybe spark a few questions in your minds as you're listening. So we think right now, as we look at the management consulting and the consulting market overall, that the leading ones, the leading consultancies will do, as it say here, three things right. They're going to pick preferred technology partners and they're going to ride or die with them. They're going to aggressively adopt AI internally. That is, finding ways that they can infuse artificial intelligence, whether that's Gen AI or agentic AI or amalgamated AI, whatever AI it is, to their own processes, to their own solutions, to their own accelerators. But at the same time, they're going to tell their clients, hey, go slow, don't overinvest in AI now, because it might not be the right thing in less than a year from now. And then the last thing they're going to do right is figuring out what to do with managed services. This is a long-standing challenge for a lot of consultancies, how far down the stack to move, but then more importantly, once you build up that capability around managed services, do you grow it? Do you cap it? How do you make the most out of it? So we know that's the things that are going to be done right. We also know that most management consulting and IT services are not going to get all three right. And we're going to talk about that over the course of this half hour. And so here's the agenda. We'll talk about some IT services trends. We'll talk about management consulting and changes that are happening there. And then we'll talk about specific companies. And on the note of specific companies, if you're new to a technology business research webinar, or you haven't interacted with us before, it's important to understand that we come at the market that we're researching by looking at individual companies. So we look to understand the business model, the strategy, and the performance of companies across the technology space. In the particular practice that we're all in, professional services, we're looking at companies that range from McKinsey on one end of the spectrum of services to Wipro on the other end of the spectrum. And each of the analysts that you see here that are joining me today have a set of companies that they cover. And actually, I don't think these lists are exhaustive. I think there might be a couple others here that we haven't listed. But you can see, looking at Kevin and Elitza and Kelly, you can see those are the companies they cover. So if you have specific questions about those companies, definitely throw them into the chat and we'll get to them by the end of the call. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Elitza to take us through the first part of this webinar. Elitza?
Thank you, Patrick. So let's start with the broad IT services market view, and then we'll dive into the management consulting, which is, essentially a big segment of IT services. So this graph is from TBR's IT services vendor benchmark, which we publish on a quarterly basis, and the most recent one is going to publish this Friday, which is going to be on 1Q25 earnings and financials. But this benchmark essentially includes 31 of the leading IT services providers. So what you're seeing is the aggregate information for those 31 vendors. But I want to call out here is that this data is based on our TBR's proprietary IT services taxonomy. And this data combines reported information for pure play IT services vendors with TBR extensively modeled data and estimates for the vendors that have multiple lines of businesses. For example, the technology providers like SAP, Oracle, Dell, and Fujitsu, which each have an IT services component in their business. So to come up with this information, we combine a lot of available data plus modeled data on our end to be able to make this apples to apples comparison across the 31 vendors at the top level and across the IT services providers. We also estimate revenue 1 year ahead, and you can see on the graph our estimate for 2025 is in the low single digits, and I'll explain about that. But essentially, we make sure that we adjust the estimate as the year progresses. So essentially, every quarter we estimate, we refine our estimates to come up with the final figure at the end of the year in 4Q. At this point, so and we're trying to be as much accurate as possible, and we actually do that. We get very close to what we estimate. So we're because we know the companies, we usually get to the very point of the reported data. So in terms of market performance, macroeconomic uncertainty that's been lingering over the past 2 years now led to a deceleration in overall IT services revenue growth in 2024. You can see that clearly on the graph. But TBR expects revenue growth to begin to improve in 2025. It will be in the low single digits, but it will be better than 2024. That's our expectation based on the 31 vendors and based on the outlook provided by those vendors that we track and we have relationships with that give us directional guidance. Discretionary spending was tight in 2024. It remains challenged in the beginning of, or essentially now it's almost the first half of 2025. But there is still IT services spending, and it continues as clients are switching from innovation engagements to run the business managed services opportunities that enable clients to operate in those challenging market conditions. So clients are showing interest in large transformation offerings that enable them to improve productivity, to gain cost savings. And this trend is positively affecting IT services providers' managed services deals in their signing mix. However, such engagements have yet to accelerate revenue streams as they're typically longer in duration and take more time to convert to revenue. So that was one of the factors why 2024 was such a low growth rate, because there was no discretionary spending. Consulting growth was pressured. Managed services signings were increasing, but they were not generating revenue streams yet. So we're expecting managed services to contribute more in 2025, and that's why we're having an acceleration in revenue growth. There is demand for cloud modernization, supply chain optimization, and cybersecurity services, and across multiple vendors. So we're going to see this continue during the 2025. Now, if we move to the next slide, moving from the broad IT services vendors and trends into the trends for the public sector. So this again is a graph from the upcoming IT services benchmark, and it dives into the public sector specifically for IT services. And we are looking at selecting 17 vendors that are in the report and analyzing their performance only in the public sector, specifically to IT services. Again, this slide is based on model data on our taxonomy and information that we come up with in terms of estimations and calculations to make sure that those 17 vendors are compared apples to apples in terms of their go-to-market strategies and financials, specifically for IT services in the public sector. So global revenue performance in the public sector for those 17 benchmark vendors has been on a steady growth, and you can see the trend over the past 3 quarters. Yes, it's in the close to the mid-single digits, but it's still steady and better performing than the overall IT services revenue growth. Growth was supported by strategic IT modernization programs, defense and intelligence solution adoption, and health IT spending. But TBR expects contrasting trends in revenue in the public sector when we look at from a geographic perspective, comparing EMEA and North America during 2025. We expect sustained revenue growth in EMEA and revenue growth challenges in North America. So in summary, for EMEA, there were recent legislative changes in the European Union that emphasize digital transformation, cybersecurity, and technological sovereignty that are driving increase in demand in defense and infrastructure spending. So just for example, the Artificial Intelligence Act that was introduced that drives demand for regulatory services. So public sector organizations that deploy AI must comply with the strict requirements related to high-risk applications and AI systems, which has led to higher spending in areas such as compliance, infrastructure modernization, AI-related training and monitoring, and incident reporting. Now, in contrast, in North America, while revenue growth was increasing up until the end of 1Q25, there is fear and doubt that the sector will not perform the same way in 2025 and 2026 because of changes in legislation. So the potential setback within the U.S. public sector could happen because of initiatives that are driven by the Department of Government Efficiency in the U.S. that review and justify consultants' work and will likely pressure revenue growth, at least in the short term. So those activities potentially could challenge growth for vendors that perform in federal space in the U.S. But there's still room for IT modernization that will be necessary for agencies to remain efficient if they're slashing headcount and creating pockets for opportunities for IT services providers. So there will be pockets of challenges and pockets of growth within North America in the public sector. And now we're going to move to the management consulting space, which is, a subsegment of IT services. And we have a dedicated research stream that Kelly leads. And again, we're using management consulting taxonomy internally that we have created to build the proprietary models with data to generate those management consulting financials and metrics that we compare in our management consulting benchmark with the cover vendors in that report. So Kelly, turn it over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Alitza, and thank you all for joining. So on this slide, we wanted to kind of walk through the management consulting data here and kind of look at some of the trends. So on this chart that we see here, it's our data from last iteration, so the proprietary info that Alitza was talking about, that kind of brings together some of the, brings together the revenue of a lot of these vendors to kind of take a deeper look into how they're doing and how they're faring against the uncertainty going on. In the short term, so looking for the remainder of 2025 and thus far in the year, we've seen a lot of the consultancies are prioritizing the digital solutions, cloud and AI development to help them remain relevant with their clients, better compete against some of their peers, as well as generate new consulting projects. A lot of their clients are looking to leverage technology as part of their business strategy. So they're seeing a greater push around how to develop that expertise in-house, not just the consulting side, but also the more technical offerings and solutions. As we finish off 2025, we'll likely see a continuation of the overall strategy refresh that we've kind of alluded to so far. So seeing how they're adjusting their own models, their own businesses, and their people to better align with their client needs and just different needs in the market for them and their own internal direction. The refresh is really to help them, or is with a big goal of pairing their consulting expertise with these different portfolios that they may not have had in the past. The portfolios of these consultancies, as well as the staffing models, are a lot different than even 5 years ago. So the change in these strategies is really to reflect that and help them to better engage with their clients and better push forward. So we're also seeing more attention to talent pyramid shifting. So thinking about that different mix of talent on these different engagements, as there needs to be a stronger emphasis across industry, technology, and function as we move into 2026. Another point to keep in mind here is around outcomes. While technology is really a big driver for a lot of clients, I think the idea of the outcome, the business outcomes, it can't be lost amidst some of this transition, but it does remain central to a lot of the consultancies' value propositions. Managed services has also seen a bit of an uptick in a lot of the consultancies. They're expanding these practices and these offerings, and that's helping them to achieve these outcomes. It helps create or help solve a lot of these business problems and upkeep a lot of that. So we're seeing a lot of the vendors kind of expand those functions to help extend the life of these transformations and make sure that they're upheld. The ongoing uncertainty is definitely helping the consultancies. Revenue is still a bit strange, but a lot of the questions around supply chain optimization, data structure, which includes a variety of needs, as well as just still those efficiency-driven operational measures, are definitely creating supplemental revenue opportunities to help offset some of these major declines in larger scale projects that are probably being pushed off in favor of these short-term and quicker scale projects. So moving on to the next slide, the need around technology has definitely changed the way that portfolios and talent teams are comprised. Consultancies have definitely strengthened their technology units to better align with this need and improve their consulting positioning overall. A good example of this is BCG, the way that they brought together their subsidiaries underneath BCGX, and a better way to work with their technology teams and their consulting teams, a better way for them to bring together these two and really bring across the message of their portfolio and the whole scope. Another example is the creation of PwC's AI Innovation Unit in the UK. So we're seeing a lot more of these technology-focused units being created to help these vendors really extend the life of their consulting and really bring to life the technology side. The approach to partner ecosystems as well has really changed the technology need, or we're seeing a change in the partner ecosystems as a result of this technology needs. So how are the consultancies partnering? How are they changing who they're partnering with and what the goals of these partnerships are? We're definitely seeing a broader set of vendors that these consultancies are partnering with, so a greater variety to bring in more expertise, not just about the technology, but also a focus on the industry side, as domain knowledge is becoming more of an expectation and not necessarily just a benefit if the vendor happens to have strong knowledge in that area. The last point I wanted to make on this slide was just that consultancies are better recognizing that clients are expecting more from them in terms of their offerings and how to achieve these outcomes, which is guiding the emphasis on technology. We'll likely see an increase in emphasis on their talent again, an uptick in training programs to help build those skills in AI and data, as opposed to accelerated hiring efforts. I think we're definitely seeing that shift away from the large scale hiring efforts and more focusing on developing either in-house or looking just for a more limited number of more experienced and higher level employees. But with that, I'll hand it over to Patrick.
Thanks. And I think that it's really important to sort of set the stage and understand what the big trends are that are happening across IT services and consulting. And now we'll shift a little bit and talk about the way we think about the different companies and categorize them, and then we'll take it one step further down and we'll look at the individual companies themselves. So what we have here on this slide is as simple as it gets, but we've been saying for years that emerging technologies and technology overall really has been permeating everything in the management consulting space. But what we're seeing now is increasingly that there are divergences in how the consultancies themselves handle technology. Some differences were always there, but across the board, the differences are becoming more pronounced. So as the ecosystem, and when we say that, we mean consultancies, IT services companies, hyperscalers, SaaS vendors, even OEMs, which we hear from a lot, as that ecosystem evolves, the consulting strategy, that the business of running a consulting firm must evolve as well. And picking the right strategy for where the market is heading is now, of course, critical, especially over the last couple of years, the way consulting has been hammered the way it has. So here we have the broad approaches that we're seeing from each of these broad vendor company groups. And we'll talk about specific companies in a minute. We don't think that any single strategy would work across all three. We also don't think that the emerging ecosystem will favor consultancies that are more aggressive or consistently following we think they will, the emerging ecosystem will favor consultancies that are most aggressively and consistently following a strategy that fits them best. So in short, what I'm trying to say is firms, consultancies that are faced with and are going through indecision right now, that are changing their strategy, changing their approach to technology, to their alliances, to the technology ecosystem overall, that are chasing after the sort of easy, quick return on whether it's Gen AI or now agentic AI. All of those decisions, the indecision, the changing strategies, and the chasing after quick ROI, those are really kind of more deadly than ever now, because the longer term, the shifts that we're seeing are, are seismic, tectonic, however you want to describe it. But it's the smart strategies that we think are coming into play from some of these firms that are worth keeping an eye on, because they're the ones that are going to succeed. So with that, let's talk about some of the companies that are in these different groups. And you can see here, this is what we call the bubble chart. It's in our management consulting benchmark that comes out twice a year, coming out soon, right, Kelly?
Yeah, in a few weeks.
And coming out in a few weeks. These are the consultancies that we look at. And when you see these bubbles here, you might be surprised that, for example, Accenture is not much bigger than everyone else. That's because we're only looking at the management consulting revenue of these companies. So we use our own taxonomy to break down these companies to determine what is management consulting and what is everything else that they do. So also, for example, this does not include Deloitte, EY, KPMG, or PwC's tax practices or their audit practice. It is just management consulting. And so we can certainly spend all day on this particular chart, but what I want to do first is turn it over to Kevin to talk a little bit about Bain.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, I just want to give a quick overview of Bain & Company. Bain, really since its inception or recent history, has really been known for its strategy consulting prowess and its industry expertise, and that really helped build upon its prestigious reputation that it's built. However, after the uncertainty brought on by, during COVID and then that subsequent boom, Bain's really seen a slowdown, a growth slowdown. And last year, the revenue continued to dip, and as they finished up those existing projects. But looking forward to second half 25 and into 26, we expect to see a bit of a turnaround. This because many of the companies are increasingly looking for that strategic advice. Really what is core to Bain's strength. They also need more help with technology. An area that Bain's actively investing in, despite trailing some of its MBB or strategy peers or big four competitors. But over the past few years, technology has really emerged as a crucial element of Bain's strategy. As digital transformation initiatives really have brought up and brought IT to most boardroom discussions. Bain has been focused on investing in and how to develop emerging technology strategies, such as, cloud and AI, how they're transforming its clients and the industries that they play in, which is also influencing where, the clients are allocating their budgets. As digital advancements become increasing priorities for those senior leaders. To meet these demands, Bain has made a significant shift in its approach. Historically, Bain grew its expertise slowly, conservatively, always internally, developing that talent and that knowledge from within. However, it's starting in 2018, they began looking outside the firm. They actually acquired, for the first time in its history, 40 plus years at the time, they acquired a company called Ford, a digital marketing agency, small in scale, but it was a massive cultural shift for Bain, which is since 2018, it's been followed up by another dozen or so acquisitions. This inorganic strategy, it's been pivotal. It's allowing Bain to more quickly gain, advanced technologies and specialized talent, helping them tackle, those complex technology-driven challenges that its customers face. This focus on tech acquisitions isn't really just about, getting bigger. It's about making their value proposition strong to its clients to be able to justify its premium fees and, that they charge. Leadership changes certainly help spark this new mindset. Manny Maceda, who became the worldwide managing partner back in 2017, he's the one that really kind of spearheaded this and, kicked off this inorganic growth focus. Just last year, Christoph Devasser took over for the Masita and the global managing partner capability, and I want to say in July. But we fully expect Devasser to build on Manny Masita's acquisition-driven growth strategy, particularly since recently, just a few months ago, Masita's been named the new chairman of Bain & Company. So lastly, let me just kind of summarize with two kind of broad scenarios. In a best case scenario, Bain successfully brings all these new technologies and talent together, further solidifying its position as a top-tier management consulting firm. Their disciplined approach, their trusted brand, that'll drive back, its recent historical double-digit revenue growth that it was just so easily capturing for years. This will provide those dollars to be reinvested, allowing them to narrow any technology gap with competitors more quickly than expected. However, on the flip side, there could be challenges. The tech consulting market is seeing aggressive competition from IT services companies and consulting arms of the major cloud providers. These tech giants are increasingly attracting that top talent and combining their deep technological know-how, with strategic advice. To counter this, Bain must prioritize attracting and keeping and retaining those best people to support growth in areas like AI and digital transformation and cloud transformation. While Bain's traditional internal hiring strategy has worked well, rapidly expanding its workforce in the tech space, that comes with the risk of diluting its prestigious brand and its ability to command that premium pricing. Now we'll go ahead and cede the floor to the next.
Thanks, Kevin. I just want to make a note that we have seen in recent months, McKinsey sort of taking the opposite approach and beginning to shed a lot of its highly specialized technology talent. And so our read on that, our initial read on that is it's a move by McKinsey. It's an understanding by McKinsey that their value is going to come more through partnering with technology providers rather than trying to be the data scientists and the AI specialists and all that. So it's clearly these are two firms that are taking a different strategic approach. I would never bet against McKinsey. Then again, Bain is changing, which has never happened before. So that we'll see where that goes. Kelly, you want to talk a little bit about who do you want to talk about?
I can quickly touch on BCG.
Great.
Just extending the strategy led. I think thinking about what Patrick and Kevin have mentioned about Bain and McKinsey, I think BCG is definitely more on the Bain side of the spectrum in terms of that specialized technology. During 2025 so far, and then in late 2024, they definitely pushed a bit for their investments around AI, kind of beefing that up, kind of adding a bit more in terms of people as well as portfolio. And I think they've shifted their talent approach just a little bit to focus more on, as I was talking about a little bit before, the higher experienced technology. And there's just technologists, and there's just a lot more that they're able to do now with their own in-house technology, as well as some of these people. I think for BCG, maintaining a balance between that technology investment and its consulting will definitely be a challenge for the firm as it's pushing towards the AI adoption and innovation. BCGX has definitely been a key turning point for the firm, helping it to embed technology across everything that they do, and spanning technology into most of their portfolio. Historically, it's been more challenging for the firm to bring that technology alongside its consulting, but I think using BCG and the higher skilled both consultants and technologists will help them strengthen their collaboration as they move forward. Lisa,
yeah, let's have Lisa. You think?
Patrick, I didn't hear you well, but I assume you're asking me to talk about IBM.
Yes, please do, Alita. Thank you.
So IBM, it really focuses on three areas: expanding in hybrid cloud, AI, and cybersecurity. And IBM Consulting, the IT services or professional services part of IBM, is the lever that drives that transformation for clients, that implementation of technology solutions and managed services. So IBM is really the consulting-led arm of IBM Consulting. Yeah, is the consulting-led arm of IBM that helps clients with adopting hybrid cloud and AI, for example. As Patrick discussed in the beginning, on the opening of this session, is that partnerships is one of the area that vendors are developing, and IBM is really one good example because historically it used to be very close company that emphasizes and relied largely on IBM technology offerings and implementing them. But now, over the past 2 years, the company has become much more open to partnerships, including partnering with direct IT services competitors. So IBM is building its ecosystem, very often building a technology agnostic value proposition for clients, where clients are able to select the most suitable solutions from IBM and from its partners. And while clients are, able to select what's suitable, IBM is also gradually establishing specialized and deeper relationships with select vendors. And one example is Microsoft. Just in April, IBM created specific dedicated practice for technologies from Microsoft. For example, Azure OpenAI, Azure Cloud, or Copilot. So building that practice, and this is something that, for example, Accenture has been doing with Microsoft specifically, establishing dedicated practices and special relationships with other vendors, technology vendors, particularly helping IBM create new portfolio offerings around industry-specific solutions. So really, Microsoft is becoming, maybe in the future, a more preferred relationship for IBM. Capgemini is another vendor that I cover and really stands out with the industry expertise and building that expertise and integrating with management consulting solutions. So developing offerings together with partners as well on the technology side, for example, Google Cloud in AI, and going to market with its partners and enabling that industry side is really helping Capgemini grow in management consulting. Another example is financial services expertise, which is financial services is really the leading industry for Capgemini, and 2 acquisitions that recently happened in financial services is helping the company gain more capabilities there and drive work around regulatory and compliance needs. So building that industry expertise is really key lever for Capgemini. Patrick, I turn it over to you.
Let's do a lightning round here on Accenture, Deloitte, EY, and KPMG. Accenture, as we all know, has just gone through a reorg, or is going through a reorganization. But what's really important about Accenture in the management consulting space has been sort of the slow and low decline of that management consulting practice within Accenture in terms of its importance to the larger company. It was back a decade ago or so when both Accenture and IBM simultaneously launched significant management consulting practices, or at least invested heavily in them. And both of them have seen changes, to say the least, over the years. We don't think that management consulting, of course, is going away for Accenture, but certainly not a priority, or not the highest priority in that company's strategy right now. Deloitte, interestingly, has become very much like Accenture in a lot of ways, maybe perhaps except for the management consulting space. We do see that Deloitte's always been the kind of 800-pound gorilla in the management consulting space. That I don't think is going to change either. What's been interesting is to see in the last couple of years the way that Deloitte has emulated Accenture's business groups. That is, the partnerships, the alliances that they have with select technology vendors, hyperscalers or software vendors. And that strategy has worked really well for Accenture as a whole. We anticipate that same strategy is working well we know that same strategy is working well for Deloitte. EY is of all of these the one to really keep a close eye on, because they have explicitly convincingly created a strategy around their alliances, around their technology partnerships that is about their sort of magnificent seven, their top 7 technology partners. Now you can argue they have to do that because of the audit relationships they have with other technology companies. But what is important is the way that they've gone all in on a few of those partners in a way that really does make them stand out. Very much a picking favorites and kind of a ride or die mentality. The EY Microsoft relationship is probably the most important one of those. And if anyone has questions, we can always do a whole webinar just on that. And then KPMG, I think, of course, is also, we're expecting faster growth from them based on investments that they've made over the last few years. And also, quite importantly, their now new relationship with SAP and the opportunity that they have to build on the long-standing, but of course couldn't do too much, alliance relationship they had with SAP. So it sort of covered a lot of the ground here. I think we sort of see everyone has a slightly different strategy. Now we're going to get into questions about who really is going to come out on top. Before we do that, though, I just want to put on the board here a number of the questions that we are constantly asking or we are being asked by our clients. These are the questions that sort of circle the consulting space. We actually had one that came in the chat, in the Q&A, asking specifically about how will AI change the consulting talent pyramid. And I think I'll take this one first. And I think the expectation that we have and what we're already beginning to see is that it's no longer going to be a pyramid. It'll be more of an obelisk. So the bottom of that pyramid, the new hires, the fresh hires, the MBA grads that typically are brought in en masse into a consultancy, that's starting to go away and is going to continue to go away. They will hire fewer people because they need fewer people at the bottom of that, well, pyramid, now obelisk. The huge challenge there is that the consulting business model, particularly for the big 4 firms and the strategy houses, is an apprenticeship model. You come on board, you learn by doing, you grow up through the ranks. How getting rid of that bottom layer in the apprenticeship model is going to shake out, we don't really know. And it's the question that we're getting a lot from our clients. It's one of the biggest challenges I think all these firms will face. We also got a question about managed services in the Q&A, and that is on here on the bottom on the right. So let me ask Alitza to weigh in on that first, and then maybe Kelly, and then I'll jump in as well. Alitza, your thoughts on the managed services?
Yeah, so IBM and Capgemini are a good example, and Accenture, good examples of professional IT services providers that have a significant managed services arm. For IBM, it's bigger than consulting. For Capgemini as well. So working in applications services or in business process services, and especially now when there's demand for cost optimization, for productivity improvement, for supply chain optimization with all the tariffs, and expanding those capabilities and activities with clients is essentially driving more consulting opportunities for Capgemini, IBM, and Accenture to implement, for example, technology-enabled solutions using the consulting expertise to implement into the managed services opportunities and drive those larger scale transformations. So essentially pulling more from their portfolios across the services life cycle and getting more advisory on how to improve my operations with AI, for example, or how to make my operations more secure, or how to modernize my applications that IBM is already running for clients on the managed services space. So there's definitely more going on, especially with technology-enabled solutions that are coming into the mix.
Excellent, thanks. And if there are other questions on that, it is something that is definitely a shift in the mindset, in the culture, in the approach when it comes to consulting, to think about the managed services being the entree to new opportunities. I want to touch on one more of these here while the team is all assembled, and that's technology agnostic versus picking favorite tech partners. This is one of the most important changes we've seen in the last few years in the consulting ecosystem. and that is moving away from being agnostic and being able to, willing to, and investing in and making a strategic choice to pick favorites and work with them. And I didn't say the word exclusively because that's not what we mean. We just mean building up your teams, building up your capabilities, developing IP around a certain technology partner, and going to market with them. And we can talk at sort of at length, and I will in a minute, about what that looks like and why we're seeing that change. But the challenge for each of the consultancies we've been talking about is whether they remain agnostic or whether they choose to go with the picking technology favorites. So maybe I'll ask Kevin and then Kelly to just weigh in on this one real quickly. Kevin?
Yeah, I can come in from kind of the Bain and company point of view. I would definitely say they're going to stay true to their conservative nature. They're not going to go too all in too quickly with anyone. They definitely want to drive their own destiny and have their own brand, have their own reputation. So that I definitely see them more remaining technology agnostic. They just want to be able to pull in, their core is, that strategy consulting piece. They're not going down the chain to anything, managed services related. They employ, Bain capability centers to support their own, project work at their local offices. But, that's what I would have to say on it for, the Bain point of view.
Excellent. Thank you. And Kelly?
Yeah, sure. I think obviously McKinsey has been tech agnostic from the beginning. I think so as Kevin talked about, and I think BCG in particular, they really kind of leaned into that tech agnostic play that they're able to do. A lot of the big four don't have that benefit as they have their audit relationships and they can't partner as freely. But I think definitely BCG is taking advantage of that tech agnostic opportunity, and they've been able to expand those partnerships to span many different areas. Sustainability was a big area of investments, of creating those more sustainability oriented technologies. But then also just being able to partner across some of the hyperscalers and some of the other vendors to create solutions that work across these platforms, and they're able to better work with their own clients because they can come in at any point and they can work across these transformations, connecting these clouds, connecting these different data sources, data lakes, and just enabling them to work with partners, whomever they want, whatever benefits the client, not so much the vendor relationship.
And then I'll just add, from my perspective, I think that the technology agnostic, in a couple of years, we won't even be having this discussion anymore, because clients themselves know that the companies, the consultancies that have picked favorites, that have a deeper relationship, that have invested in IP, that have co-invested in solutions, are the ones that are preferred, even if you don't want the vendor lock-in. That was always a thing. Or if you already had a technology in place, you didn't want to have to change. That was always a thing. That's all changing. And I think we'll, again, in a couple of years, we won't even be having this discussion anymore. So that leads to, this is what we were going to talk about over the course of this webinar. So I do want to, as we wrap up, talk about, did we answer all of these questions? The different strategies that they'll take, and what will it mean for consultancies partners? I think this is where I'll get back on my soapbox about technology agnosticism. This is where I think we see the most significant change in the next couple of years. We've talked about the consultancies and their strategies, but coming from the partner's view, that is from the perspective of the cloud companies, of the SaaS vendors, what do all of these strategic choices and these business model changes that the consultancies are going through, what does it mean for them? We have some research that's coming out very soon on ecosystem. We call it Voice of the Partner. And that Voice of the Partner research looks at how each of the groups of partners, that is IT services companies and consultancies on one group, cloud and software companies on another group, and OEMs in another group, how do they look at each other? What are they looking for? And two findings that are in this research that I think are particularly relevant for today. One is knowledge management remains a key sticking point and a priority. And by that, I mean, no one does it well as they'd like to, and everyone sees value in it. So when it comes to strategic direction and business model, maybe knowledge management. And by knowledge management, I mean how each partner across the ecosystem understands the other's value proposition and offerings. It's not always top of mind, but if consultancies choose a select group of technology partners, that makes knowledge management a lot easier to execute because you're not trying to educate everyone about what you do. You're only trying to educate a select group of people. Remaining agnostic makes that much more difficult. The second key finding is around sales alignment, and this is an absolute must. And when we say alignment, we recognize fully, and the companies that we spoke to as well fully recognize that the sales team at a KPMG and at Salesforce are not going to be the same structure. They're not going to have the same incentives. They're not going to be aligned in that way. But what they can be aligned on is understanding each other and what each of them is bringing to the market and being able to articulate the value that the other company brings. So those two things are super important as we look at what we call, again, voice of the partner, and we look at how the strategy decisions that these consultancies are making for themselves, for their business model, how that will impact the rest of the ecosystem. So we have had some predictions over the course of here as who's going to result in above peer growth, but I'm going to warn my team right now that before we wrap up, I'm going to ask each one of them to weigh in with who they think is going to have the best year between now and, let's make it the next year and a half. Who's going to have the best year and a half? So from now to the end of 2026, and give me at least one or two reasons why. And then on this last point, we're talking about how competitors in IT, how they calibrate their strategies and take advantages of missteps. So that's what we're going to get to, I guess, by asking who's going to win, is sort of tell you who's possibly going to be on the losing end of that. But more importantly, where are the opportunities for alliance partners, where are the opportunities for others across the ecosystem to take advantage of either missteps or the continued growth. So I hope I've given Kelly and Kevin and Elitza enough of a warning to come up with their answer for who is going to have the best next 18 months of all the companies we've talked about. So we don't need to do the laggards today. We just need to talk about the leaders. So I'll go Kevin first. Kevin, what do you got?
Wonderful. So yeah, I would definitely, it kind of goes back to the point that Patrick was making on McKinsey, that it's kind of, we always see these tech cycles, from the IT services point of view as a bit of a pendulum. And McKinsey and BCG of the strategy 3, they were the quickest out of the gates, when, digital transformation and cloud was the big buzzword and where all the money was going. Bain was very much slow. They knew what their capabilities were. And, come 2018, they did those acquisitions. They were willing because that's what the clients were asking, but they're definitely not all in on tech. And I think they're best positioned for if, it seems like a 20-year bull market. And, since 2008, things have just been headed up, and they've had to find new ways to, get involved in, all this money going to tech and where those boardroom conversations are going. But, with tariffs, with global uncertainty, if, the business cycle changes and, we head into, a downturn, I think Bain is best positioned, to capitalize on that and go back to its core strengths, with business strategy talks, being that trusted advisor to those C-level executives. And, they've retained a lot of their bodies. There was some churn after, the post-COVID hiring, but I would say of the strategy 3, I think they're best positioned among those folks.
Excellent. And a reminder to me that when I'm asking my team for stuff like this, I need to remind them not to pick the company that they cover or one of the companies they cover. But I didn't add that caveat, so Elitza and Kelly are fine to weigh in with who they want. Elitza, we'll go to you next.
Yes, so out of the solutions-led, Accenture, IBM, and Capgemini, I think Accenture is the one that's best positioned. And all 3 have been challenged by discretionary spending declines. All 3 are experiencing similar expansion and similar challenges, I would say, in terms of industry verticals, in terms of service area performance or underperformance. But Accenture, among the 3, is a company that's been really good at execution of the strategy, of execution around integrating acquisitions, really planning ahead and really being vocal and transparent in its activities. So if I were to pick among the three, I would say that Accenture would perform better in management consulting and overall in IT services among the three.
Yeah, I think I would lean more closely to the strategy or solutions-led vendors. I think the scale of the big four can be a hindrance in some cases where they don't have the flexibility to change as quickly and to navigate in different directions. I think the benefit that the solutions-led has over the strategy-led is definitely the pairing of the IT services and the technical expertise with their consulting. Granted, they don't have the same consulting scale or expertise, but I think the depth within the technology, which is what a lot of clients are looking for, and not so much the long-term discussions around technology. I think the solutions that probably have a bit of a benefit from that perspective. Which one in particular? I'm not so sure.
You gotta pick one.
I would probably say Capgemini or Accenture. I think maybe Capgemini, but the scale that they have in some regions might be more of a challenge for them. But I think they probably have a good position to do well.
Excellent. And I'll wrap up by saying I get pick three. So I'll say the fastest growing. So over the course of the next 18 months, I'll put a stake in the ground that the fastest growing is going to be KPMG. The most surprising, I think, is going to be BCG. I think we'll see a lot more change there than in anybody else. And I think we're going to get the most questions. And when I say most questions, I mean relative to how many questions we already get. I think we'll get the most questions about Deloitte. I think they continue to be, and they will increasingly be a little bit hard to understand sometimes from the outside, and somebody that, in the same way that everybody wants to partner with Accenture if they can, there's going to be a lot more people clamoring about how do we partner better with, how do we partner differently, how do we partner better with Deloitte. So I think we'll see those are the next 18 months worth of questions I think we'll have. I've been showing on the screen the coverage that we have in the benchmark. We've certainly covered Q&A. I think we got to everybody's questions that were in the Q&A, and appreciate everyone staying as long as they did on this. We went a little bit over than we expected. If you have additional follow-up questions, please send them to us. I think, were our emails on the very first slide? I don't recall, but I'll bring it back up. But please.